Oh, here comes Chris. It's 5:30. I'm waiting for Chris to show up, and it looks like he's coming. Major thunderstorm coming.
I know, I saw that.
I can hear
like
just like
tornado
shaboom, shaboom, shaboom. Tornado warning too?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good time to take the
Damn
truck.
good thing we are not riding.
Damn good thing we're not real men.
You like my getup?
It's very styling.
I thought so.
Well, let's get the flock out of here.
Yeah.
And this is the first test of the new Mega Tie-Down Bar 9000.
Tie-down bar.
All right, we made it by how many seconds?
2.
We got the bikes,
Literally 2.
We got the bike strapped in.
Closed the door and this happened.
Woo, we got the bike strapped in, and then it just started pissing. So I think Henrik and Jason
Are very wet.
and perhaps Charles are on the road in this, and us wimps are in the truck.
No, some would call that wise or smart or savvy, intelligent even.
We are phoning Joe. He was supposed to be here.
Hello, hello.
Hey, so are you coming?
Are you on the road or?
Now, this is a bit of an inside joke because Joe is famous for letting us know that, yes, he will be coming to an event, and then we plan accordingly, and then at the last minute, he does not show up. So this weekend would see Riley and Chris here in the truck, meeting up with Jason and Henrik, who were riding down like real men from Montreal. And cousin Charles, who was coming in from Toronto, and we were all meeting at a place called Rice Lake, somewhere near Peterborough, where those of us with knobby tires would ride in the dirt, and those of us with smooth tires would aimlessly wander the streets.
Have fun.
All right, we'll do.
I'll talk to you later.
Ciao.
You see
I
me?
see your phone. Woo! Woo! Okay, it's hard to drive
And
pitch black and run the camera. How far have we got to go?
we've got another 13, 14, 37, 40, yeah, like 43 kilometers.
43 kilometers.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock, which means
Like
either
42,
by
42 kilometers.
it'll be there by 10:30.
Yeah. 40 kilometers on country roads out in the middle of nowhere.
All right.
We eventually made it to the little cabin we had rented on Rice Lake and met up with Jason and the rest of the boys and had the best intentions to get to bed early so that we could start the next day early. But as you know, sometimes things don't quite go to plan.
What tire should I get? What oil should I use? Look, 2 generations of GS. The Charles Special and the Henrik 9000. And over here, the Delinquent Special.
And of course, if there's going to be a delinquent bike, there has to be a delinquent. Then it was time for the all-important pre-ride inspection.
Okay, Chris, have we checked the water level? Is that where it's supposed to be in the sight glass?
Yes. That's a difference. There's not a lot of air in the
You would
truck
like
right
one
now.
of these, Jason.
It's a lot of fun.
Yes, I would like one. I wanted to buy one, then I couldn't find one.
There, yeah, they're not.
When I was looking, when I bought the 800,
Yeah.
this is what I wanted.
I still think, I mean, after all this stuff I've done, I think it's the best bike for me. I really do. I love it. It's abused, but it loves it.
You have like swamp? Yeah, it's just stupid. Yeah. Well,
Jason, we need towels.
Yeah. You got your knapsack. Can you get 5 towels?
Are you gonna go to Walmart?
Here's my towel. Just, yeah, that works too.
That works.
And put it on your head.
So is there a list where we sign up to use that towel?
Finally, it was time to get rolling. The nice lady who ran the place seemed a little intrigued by all of the equipment we were wearing. And she also warned us about her vicious dog.
She's a Rottweiler.
Well, this is your spine protector, your neck protector. Water. It's my water.
Well, after impressing the locals with how far we could squirt, I guess, for lack of a better word, we set off. So we had 5 of us heading out. Of course, only Chris and I were really equipped to hit the dirt. But the problem when you're riding with a bunch of guys who are used to riding dual sports with real tires is that when you do get to the dirt, they have a hard time saying no.
That's going to be Greasy. I better follow him and get the video.
We got to the first trail, and Jason on the Super Motard could not resist heading in. He was not on his 640 adventure, but he did not get too far before he realized that his other street tire buddies were not going to be following him. So he turned around, and that would be the last we would see of them until the end of the day. And now you may be wondering, why did Jason turn around? It didn't look that slippery. Well, this trail was like Teflon. Take a look at Chris's rear tire here.
Woohoo! What are you stopping on the fucking trail for? That is Greasy. You skidded the rear tire first. Dude, that is slippy.
As you can see from this very flattering shot, I had forgotten my motocross jersey, so it was just me body armor and me bulges for all to seize. So we had tasked our street brethren to pick me up something to wear in their travels. The first stop on the agenda was an area called the Northumberland Forest, which I think Joe and I had been there once many years ago when we had KLRs. But when we got to the forest, the first thing we saw was some construction and some signs saying that it was closed. Luckily, it appeared to be just that entrance and rest area that was closed. But a little bit farther down the road, we saw another entrance, and in we headed. This trail looked innocent enough. There was no big dips or gullies or anything, but the surface of it was just incredibly slippery. And if you just heard me saying just before here, I thought my boot wasn't even pushing on the rear brake pedal, because when I pushed onto the brakes, I didn't slow down at all using the rear brake. And here I tried to avoid this little wet spot because I was trying to stay dry. Got off onto the side, and that was just a spin fest trying to get through there.
Alright, I think I'm out.
Finally, the consistency of the trail turned to of a more wet sand consistency, and that was really nice briefly, but then we were back on the grease.
But I didn't see you around the corner. There's trails everywhere here. There's single track. Yeah, so we must be in now. Yeah.
We eventually got away from that greasy stuff, and here you can see us on a nice ATV trail that was paralleling the main road. We weren't really following anything in our GPSs. We were just kind of meandering around, following the trail signs, and eventually one of them indicated there was some sort of a lookout, so we drove up there to have a look around. There was a couple there having a romantic moment, and they seemed very happy to see us, as you can tell here. A little farther along, we came across a hydro line, and there was some really nice sandy climbs and trails in there, so we goofed around there for a while. That trail eventually kind of petered out, so we turned around and we're heading back, and that's when we came to this really nice little sandy hill climb.
Alright, nice sandy. Holy shit, sandy! Give her! You're not gonna make it, Bill. Oh! Oh! Oh no! I'm going down!
Chris didn't make it, and nor did I. So we managed to bury both bikes.
Come back down. I don't know. I think I'm at the crest. Like, I just have to push it. No, it's going to dig.
But Chris was right, and he was close enough to the crest that he was able to just push and chew his way up, leaving a nice trench for the rest of us.
Give it some real gas. Yeah!
It was time for take 2 on the 800, and this time with a lot more gas. There was no drama whatsoever. Chris had a, shall we say, turtle head poking out, so we had to find a facility. So we got back to this area here where there was actually a map and a porta potty. And then the best part of all, if you can see it on that rock right in front of me, you'll never guess what that is. Yes, it was someone's upper denture. So this is why it is very important to always wear gloves when you are riding off-road. Although I decided not to pick it up. I would like to apologize to Johnson's based on what Chris did in there. We spent a few minutes looking at the map, and you can see this is not a huge riding area. I'm not sure what the scale of this map is, but it's not a massive riding area for sure. So we rode around a little bit longer, but at some point we could see that we were crossing our own trails. So it was not a huge area for sure. I think some of those tire tracks you're looking at now are actually ours from earlier in the day. In some of the sections it was a little more single track style trails, but a lot of these seemed to kind of peter out and dead end. A little bit later on, we were happily zipping along on a pretty innocuous looking trail when I was trying to avoid some of these washed out ruts. And it doesn't look like much, and my camera wasn't rolling, but right there I hit a rut, and man, did the front end ever bottom out. So I decided to get off and take a look because there was this weird kind of cracking noise. Later on, I figured out what it is that when you really pound the front end on the F800, the dash cluster is rubber mounted, and it actually moves enough that I think it was hitting my windshield or something and making this really nasty smacking sound.
Well, here we are in the Northumberland Forest, which is not far from Peterborough. I don't know. Anyways, we've been riding here now for a little while. We got off to a very late start. Some of us went to bed at 4 something in the morning last night. So Chris was a good boy. Where is he? So now we've been riding here for an hour or two, and really nice. Not super massive riding area. And we have seen a few little ATV tracks around, but not crazy busy. And it's nice, it's sandier. So for all the rocks we've been riding the last few weeks, it's kind of a nice change of pace. Although I just hit a rut up there and bottomed my front suspension hard enough that it made a pretty disturbing sound. So we decided just to stop and take a look, and everything seems okay. My F800 is still pristine. You got to be able to find a light that just bolts in there.
There's that big head one that can go on, but it just doesn't have a head. It doesn't have a high or low. Like, it's just on.
Who cares?
And it's not legal.
Yeah, but I would say there's got to be a housing this big that holds a standard automotive high-low beam headlight somewhere out there.
I haven't found it yet. But
Yes.
yes, you're probably right.
That looks good. A motocross fender on this, the bike's going to look odd.
I've seen it. It does look odd, but
Yeah, it looks like shite. It's all about the looks.
no, not necessarily.
That's why we do this. It's all about impressing all these people out here.
That's why we're dressed like this.
That's why we're out here with all of our fans. The only people out here are...
Our fans are the interweaves fans.
And people, the only people out here are people burying hookers from last night.
Inside that water, holy shit, there's like no traction underneath. Alright, I'm gonna go slow. Alright.
Since nothing appeared to be broken, we carried on, but we ended up in a wetter section where we were back in the grease, and I was trying to skirt around the side of one of these puddles, and down I went.
In the water? Oh, no, I landed on terra firma. Oh, you lucky bastard. Are you alright? Luckily, a tree literally broke my head fall. Do you need assistance? Yeah. You know where I'm riding back. You know where you said it was slippery? Yeah. Yeah, that was right on. Right in the water. It was really slippery. Yeah. I was going straight. Yeah. And then you weren't. There was a ridge in there. I couldn't see.
It was greasy enough that Chris was having a hard time just turning the HP2 around on the trail because he didn't have enough traction to get over the little hump in the middle. So he was kind of forced to like drag the arse of the bike around because he could not get over this little 4-inch hump in the middle of the trail, even with the rear tire spinning away. A little later on, we found this really cool trail that had a nice uphill. So here you are riding along with Chris, and you can see this is really steep. The side banks there are probably 2 or 3 feet high. Nice big washout down the middle. You would not want to fall in there. Here you kind of had to cross the washout because it was going diagonal across the trail. Chris was waiting for me to catch up. Now, common sense would dictate that the best way to get across this would be to go 90 degrees and give it some gas.
I can cross it. Can you cross it?
Wasn't sure if I was going to have enough ground clearance to make it through here without getting bottomed out. Chris was able to get the HP2 across without too much drama, but it's got a little more room under the engine than the old 800. And sure enough, when I gave it a shot, and I was perhaps a little too timid, I got hung up, and now I'm kind of sitting on the engine case, but with a little tug, we got going.
Fuck, man, that was some serious rain that eroded that.
But now for the strangest part of the day. Right after we crossed that rut, about 100 meters up the trail, we come across 2 locals in a, what is that, a Charger or a Challenger? Going down the road.
You don't want to go down there. No, it's eroded. There's like 1.5 2 foot ruts. Without the rain, you probably would have been okay, but no. I mean, walk down and take a look, but I don't think you want to try. He had to pull me through.
So I also stopped to impart some trail wisdom to our fellow travelers, but they continued down that hill anyways, and I don't know how they were going to even back up. I know there's an all-wheel drive version of that car. I don't think that was it. I'm pretty sure with rear-wheel drive facing downhill, there was no way you were going to be able to back up that hill, but people give advice by the buckets and accept it by the spoonful, so we had done what we could do, so on we went. We rode around for a little bit longer, but then we could see it was now getting on to be 5 o'clock, and our shadows were getting longer, which meant it was time to try and find the rest of the boys and have a nice cold beer. Once we got in communication with them, we decided to meet at a place called Rhino's on the edge of the lake, and that's where we met up with the rest of the crew. As I mentioned, the boys who were playing on the street had agreed to pick me up a shirt since I had forgotten my motocross jerseys at home.
Recording. Riley. Charles thought of an excellent idea to surprise you with this little gift.
Is it extra large?
Yes, and it has fashionable design on it.
Very nice.
Are you guys
Yes.
excited? 3 days. 3 days.
The new
of
season. I've
surf
never
again.
seen an episode actually.
I can't even talk to you. I don't know if you should get this beer.
Well, I got my shirt now.
You should pour it on his head.
It suits you.
Get it on video.
It does. And I think wearing it inside out, it's going to be awesome.
At Walmart? Really? They're going downhill.
That was $10 at Walmart.
Riley, please put it on.
Let me put it on.
Put it on, yeah.
Go,
See if it
cheers,
fits.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It fits.
Does it fit?
Here, pull it over the spine.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
Oh!
Yes, a new man.
Bodybuilder now.
Should I leave the tag on?
Yeah.
Yes. It's spectacular.
The nice thing
Riley.
is Walmart extra large fits me, who is extra large, wearing body armor. So that's real extra large.
All right, folks, let's drink up. Right, Charles?
Cheers.
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 Greasy
Oh.
I am definitely
Oh.
A beer later, we had a short little ride back to our cabin where we had placed Henrik in charge of acquiring sustenance for the crew. And of course, he knew exactly what to buy.
Right.
Henrik,
Oh, yeah.
how would you describe this? What are we having for supper after we have the hors d'oeuvres?
We are making arrangements for steak. It is going to be substantial. It's going to be tender and juicy. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be served with spicy potatoes, sautéed onions, and a salad.
And booze?
No, we don't drink.
Spanish vino. Charlie,
Wow.
good?
Yeah, good.
Are you going to take a shower today?
No.
All right, boys, say hi, Henrik.
Hi, Henrik.
Hi!
Let's close the window.
So we have small steaks. These are just half portions.
Now I feel better. There's some insulation between us and the
We have
water.
one extra steak for Brecky. Cousin Charles has been promoted to Uncle Charles.
Are you my uncle? Is that what happened that first night? And you sound like you enjoy it.
Can you make that sucking noise? Burpee
I
noise?
fucking love it.
That's it. That's it. You know you do.
Put some effort into it, Henrik.
You know you like it.
Wait, you want me to what do you want me to do to indicate?
I want you to go.
Yeah, that looks good.
What did you
Henrik, how was it?
Awesome.
Suck that steak.
All right, now we must obey the rule of no videotaping at night.
So the next morning, everybody was quite a bit more bright-eyed and bushy-tailed than they had been on the first morning because we all went to bed early. I think something about eating 24 ounces of partially cooked beef may have had something to do with that. Plus, a day out riding was a little more fatiguing than a day at the office. So Chris and I were getting suited up. I think Henrik had a work emergency, had to go home. Charles was wending his way back as well to Toronto. I can't remember what Jason was up to. I think he was just going to stay back at the cabin. And today, Chris and I were going to check out the Ganaraska Forest. One note is, I do believe we needed some sort of trail pass for these places. I can't remember if we had to join the Ontario Dual Sport Club or something. This was a few years ago. But I know we did have our paperwork in order. And here you can see Chris, who had a custom logo on his old BMW Navigator, punching up some coordinates that we downloaded from the web, and off we went. Now, the Ganaraska Forest is not that close to good old Montreal, so this is a place we'd never really been before, but being, people who we read about a lot of the events that are happening in Ontario, The Ganaraska Forest, or Gani, I believe, as the locals call it, seems to figure quite prominently, so we were really looking forward to checking this place out. One of the first things we noticed is that it was looking like it was going to be pretty sandy. And sand can be challenging on the big bikes. The other thing we noticed is we were already seeing traffic. So unlike a lot of the areas we ride where we can go for hours without seeing anybody, this was looking like we were going to have company, which meant we would have to be sure to stay to the right and not get crazy on blind curves or blind hills, because we have a pretty strict rule about trying to avoid head-on collisions.
Well, these guys will be passing us shortly.
So we were riding around and having a pretty good time, and what you can see here is pretty typical of a lot of the trails that we found here in the Ganaraska Forest.
You skid in the rear there. Is it steep? This is on those ones.
Then Chris found a section that was a little more single track like, and here we are. Now this is actually a downhill. It's really bizarre how sometimes with the camera it's hard to tell if it's an uphill or a downhill, and it was actually only when I was listening to the sound from the GoPro that I heard myself mentioning that we were going down a pretty steep downhill here. So we're following Chris, and at some point he got a little hard on the brakes because this actually was quite steep, and slid it and put the HP2 down. It's not quite as depressing when the guy in front of you falls on a downhill as it is on an uphill, because then you would be halfway up trying to get started. You can see that rear tire skidding, so this is actually pretty steep, but through the magic of the GoPro, once again it looks like we're driving across Saskatchewan. I'll just leave a little montage here of some of the different kinds of trails we rode. There's not much point in showing you minutes and minutes of the same kind of stuff, but I definitely was finding this riding area quite a bit more interesting than Northumberland, just because it was physically a lot bigger, and so far we'd found some more entertaining trails. So after riding around for quite a while, we found a clearing in the woods and decided to stop and take a little break.
Well, here we are in the Ganaraska Forest. First time I've been here. It's just Chris and I. We got some bad news today in that Henrik has to head home because of work. So he won't be joining us for supper tonight, and then the commute home tomorrow. And I guess when we get home, because Charles has to get home to go to the theatre, it'll just be Chris and I and Jason for supper tonight. And how are you liking the Gani so far?
It's good. A lot of whoops, really.
Yeah.
Which
lots of whoops and lots of sand.
I actually find fun,
yeah.
But
it's tiring.
It's tiring, yeah. I do enjoy it.
But some of the other stuff in the forest is really nice.
The single track is great. I like that, actually.
Yeah. The strange people you meet in the Ganaraska Forest.
A few minutes after we stopped, a couple of bikes pulled up, and we met a couple of nice guys who actually recognized us from YouTube. So we had a nice little chat, and then we headed back out on the trails. We were riding around on some of the wider stuff, but we really wanted to see if we could suss out some more of that single track stuff. And these weird little grooved out things were quite nice. Once again, this is quite steep. Chris made it up, he went to the left, I made a bad choice, went to the right, and that was all she wrote.
You can make it, I think. If I'd had it, no, I'd started spinning.
But never underestimate the power of Chris's lower back and of the F800's oil-cooled clutch. And you can see there, initially we weren't getting too far until I got my fat arse off the bike. And I think this was another example of where the lower clearance of the F800 means it just got hung up there And oddly enough, even though the HP2's got those big cylinders sticking out, the bottom of the F800 motor is a lot wider. So it tends to get stuck in ruts like that more than the HP2, even with that big boxer engine. You may have noticed that for most of the day, it's been pretty dry. But every now and then there would be these weird little wet spots, and of course this one was that really greasy black earth stuff. So down I went. We rode a little more of the wider trails, and then we saw this nice offshoot heading uphill. So I was in front here, and once again this was that kind of washed out groove with the big high banks.
Holy shit! Holy fuck!
That was steep.
But I made it.
One thing that was for sure was this was a lot more work than riding around on those wider trails, and I was feeling it. I was huffing and puffing here pretty good.
Which I didn't want to take. I'm going right, but I hit something and. All right, I'll let you go first. Go, go, go.
Oh yeah. What goes up must come down.
Dead stick, dead stick. Oh, motherfucker.
You want to stay right.
Okay, I got her started.
Riding down a hill is surprisingly more difficult with the engine off. And there I had stalled it, but managed to get it going again. And this was steep. Once again, you'll have to take my word for it, but yeah, that was a nice little downhill. One of the nice things about having the intercom is you can hear the other person up front of you groaning and moaning as they hit bumps and obstacles. So even if they're not saying anything, it kind of gives you some indication of what's happening. And then there was a louder groan than usual.
Oh, that fucking hurt my tires. Oh.
What happened?
I lost my balance and like hard hit the seat. Oh.
You got nargulated?
Yeah.
You want to take a break?
I don't want to move for a minute.
Okay. I think this is official break.
And you heard it, Chris had somehow managed to come to a dead stop and crush his wetting tackle against part of his bike. So I think that would make this a good time to take a break while he tried to pull his man plums out of his abdomen.
Okay, we're on clip 16.
Oh, I hear a bike.
Eh?
Hear a bike.
Yep. Manly men on manly machines.
Oh,
and us.
Balls feel better now.
Oh, your balls have rejoined your underwear and have pulled out of your abdomen?
Yeah.
Fuck, that's always a good thing. It's pretty hard to kick yourself in the balls.
It is.
We waited a few minutes, and once Chris no longer had 3 Adam's apples, we continued on this nice uphill single track. But I was doing quite a bit of clutch work here, trying not to spin, and at some point here hit a little bump, got a little off kilter, stalled it, and then laid the 800 down gently.
Oh, mother tucker! Oh. I've stalled it. Okay, I made it. Oh, you did? Okay, fuck. Well, I mean, made it off the route. Oh, mother tucker. I had to do the whole thing sitting.
So I was making pretty good progress up this hill. It was pretty tight, and I was doing a lot of clutching. You kind of have this temptation to want to just hold on to the handlebars and vary the throttle, but certainly on the 800, that's not a good recipe. It's a lot more clutch feathering, because if the wheel bumps over something, it's going to spin, and then a little farther along, I got a little sideways off something and decided instead of going head first into the tree, I would just step off the bike.
Oh! Oh, shit! Oh. Was that the ridge? No, that was me throwing the bike away. Oh. I literally stepped off and walked away.
I could have tried to bow hunk it up myself, but I was feeling a little tired. We'd been riding for quite a while, and I think it was better just to wait a few minutes for Chris to come down the trail, and then the two of us could lift it, because it was on kind of a awkward angle. Chris and I got the bike upright pretty easily, and then it was more of this climbing in this kind of trench, and it was actually pretty tight through here. You'll see there are these roots crisscrossing, and certainly at the speed I'm going, you're not just going to sail over them, but by the same token, if you just let it bump over without doing a little clutch modulation, sometimes it'll spin and you'll get stuck. So what I was finding here was I was making good progress and I wasn't going too fast, but I was feeling my clutch hand getting really crampy, so I was looking forward to getting to the top of this hill.
Alright, okay, I'm on the downhill.
Now, as I mentioned, this was pretty steep, and since I didn't know what was up ahead, I was trying to keep my speed down so that I wasn't going to get into a situation where I was going to have to scrub off a lot of speed. Traction was actually pretty good on the downhill, so I was able to use a lot of front brake. Then we had another little hill climb. And this one went on for quite a while.
Oh, shit show! Oh! Ah!
My foot had come off and was in front of the foot peg, and then the foot peg had come up and wedged my foot up against a root. And this was a prime example of a situation where if I hadn't been wearing a big motocross boot, my foot would have been crushed, because it was, you can see that root there, the foot peg pushed my toe right into that root, and the foot peg came up and hit the back of my boot. And that's a 500-pound bike, and I could feel the boot compress and my toes squeeze up against the inside of the toe cup. But that was the extent of it, just a little sore foot, no damage. And now Chris is giving me a little push and a little more clutch modulation, and here we go. So we kept going, finding more and more of this nice single track stuff. But it was definitely taking its toll on me. I was getting tired, and it was a lot warmer today than it had been the day before. So we decided we would pop out of the single track and get onto some wider stuff where we could get a little more speed going and kind of take a rest and cool off a bit as well. A little later on, we could see on the trail what looked like fresh hoof prints, and there was also some signage saying there was horses, and none of these hoof prints had a tire track through them, so we kind of went on alert that there was the potential for some people on horseback. And Chris was up in front when we actually caught up to some people on horseback, one of which, how shall we say this, was having a tinkle.
Okay, so are they coming our way, or you're catching up to them? I'm passing by them. You're not supposed to, are you? Well, they waved me through. Oh, okay. Oh! What? Sorry! What? Just caught somebody in the middle of What were they doing? Didn't see anything! No, a little squat on the side of the road. All right. Oh, we had the cameras! Good, how are you? It's all good. Could have been the highlight of the video. Well, it's on camera. Oh. I didn't tell them that, but it is.
The people on the horses seemed like pretty good sports, and we usually just try to slow down and stop, and then whatever the people on the horses want us to do, we do. If they want us to putt on by, we'll do that. If they want us to just kind of stop and wait while they move off, we'll do that. It's not something that happens all the time, but we try to show them a little deference. By this point, we had stopped following the GPS tracks we'd found on the web, and we were simply, wandering around kind of aimlessly. Every time we got to a junction, we would just turn left or right, depending on what looked the most interesting to us. So we did a lot of this kind of nice, tight ATV trail stuff. Some wider stuff, some was sandy, some had been graveled. All in all, a really nice riding area. And even though we'd seen some people earlier in the day, other than a couple of groups and the people on the horses, we didn't run into a lot of people. We heard a few bikes off in the distance, but it was definitely not a super popular spot. You can see some tire tracks here on what Chris is riding, but I think a lot of the guys on the smaller bikes, maybe they come in here, they blast around for an hour and they leave. So we didn't actually run into as much traffic as we thought we were going to. On our last night, it was just Chris and I and Jason had just spent a quiet day at the cabin, so we had a pretty nondescript supper. Without Henrik there to do the lion's share of the cooking, we kept it simple, and then the next morning, we all headed home.
We're out of here, bud.
Done.
We are leaving. We got back to Montreal, unloaded our bikes. Chris got his backpack on. And I guess that was a wrap for another Awesome Players off-road motorcycle adventure. What say ye, Chris?
I'm ready to go home.
Yep. See you later, Bill. Well, let's do the wrap up. It was a pretty good weekend. Northumberland Forest, not super fantastic. Ganaraska Forest was really nice. I don't know if I'd want to spend like 3 days there, but it was a fun ride. And of course, it's always a good time when we get together with the boys. So I think we'll call this one a win.
I hope you enjoyed this little adventure of the Awesome Players Off-Road Motorcycle Club. If you would like to reach us, you can drop a comment here on YouTube, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Also, it really helps us get our videos out there if you hit the like button. It even helps us more if you hit the subscribe button, and if you hit the subscribe button, you'll be notified whenever a new video comes out. If you hit that little alarm bell icon there, then you'll get a notification when a new video pops up on YouTube. You can also head over to awesomeplayers.com, and there not only can you find an email address where you can reach us and ask us anything you'd like, you can also hit the order tab and you can buy one of our Awesome Players stickers. And those ship Canada, US, and international. And finally, you can head over to Facebook. And on our Facebook page, we get posts from players from around the world who are letting us know what they're up to. And you can also see what we're up to. So once again, thanks for watching.